This we have two Haitians on the show today.
One of them was not introduced, and the other one
No,
was.
no. It's when someone made a comment about us making this a sausage fest. I decided to double down on my on patriarchy and just
Okay,
not introduce the skirt.
got it.
Ooh, you definitely doubling down on the patriarchy.
I'm
She's
going.
the
I'm going full
skirt
manosphere.
too, right?
Look,
Full,
lucky I
full
have
man.
Tanya now.
Just you know.
Congratulations, by the way.
But to my two Haitian comrades,
Mhm.
um, M Toussaint in our earlier morning production call, that she didn't know production calls are not scheduled.
Oh man,
Uh, you
I gotta
might,
be dressed all the time now.
well,
Yeah.
like we said, cover the beef and you're fine.
No more Donald Duck in it. Okay.
But you brought up an interesting point that it has been a year since the assassination of Jovenel Moïse.
Correct. Correct. Does it feel like
What?
it's been a year?
Can you read this comment?
Sure. 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 Haiti on Thursday, that would be today, commemorates the 1 year anniversary of the murder of President Jovenel Moïse, whose killing created a power vacuum and allowed the country's gangs to expand their territory and even take over the headquarters of the nation's courts. Haitian police have arrested more than 40 people, but have yet to charge anyone in the murder, in which a group of gunmen that included former Colombian soldiers stormed Moise's home in a pre dawn raid.
That would be correct.
That would be correct. So, where are we now a year later? I feel like that's the question.
That is.
I
So,
think that what we're seeing today is basically the implosion of the concept, the even notion of a Haitian nation state. Even though the concept was somewhat precarious before the fact, what has turned to be the case is that the United States, unwilling to really invest any material resources on the ground in Haiti because of the rather negative history it has in doing so, has surrendered the investigation into the murder of Jovenel Moïse in the hands of an incompetent, uh, you know, sitting, president in, of pro tempore, if you will, Ariel Henry, who has been accused of being actually one of the co-conspirators in the assassination. One of the things that we have to understand is that the political situation in Haiti is so tenuous that there is no political situation, meaning that no one knows exactly when there will be an election, if there will be an election, and we have literally, pretty much more so in the Port-au-Prince area, we have these gangs that are orchestrating as if they have controls of territories at the behest of themselves. Some argue at the behest of the state. Some argue at the behest of international actors or the oligarchs. But the bottom line, what we are seeing is that there has been no major advance. Yes, we had the implication of Colombian mercenaries. There were some 40 some odd individuals who thought to have had participated. 18 of them were arrested. Only less than five of them have been tried. We're still trying to find day by day individuals who are suggested to be in or brought in. But the bottom line is that no one is discussing what the overall real world material causes were of the assassination of Jovenel Moïse. Ryan Grimm of The Intercept had some interesting reporting talking about how there was a U.S. ambassador who had stated that it might be to our betterment to get rid of this guy, Jovenel Moïse, meaning that he is not playing ball. There are some saying that he was reaching out. Well, we know he was reaching out to the Turks as a means of trying to find an alternative power vacuum to the oligarchs in terms of developing the country. There are some say that he was willing to even reach out to the Russians, and that could have been the final straw that broke the camel's back. But one thing that I'm safe to say, and I have said for since the assassination, is that a Haitian president is not getting assassinated without a green light by the U.S. State Department. And the question becomes, how high up the food chain was the State Department in ordering this assassination? And why exactly, in the face of all Joe Biden is facing with immigration problems from South America and Latin America, is he willing to allow Haiti to collapse into this chaotic state without offering even a modicum of a solution? It's a question that I haven't found an appropriate answer for myself.
Hmm.
M Toussaint, any thoughts?
Well, I can tell you, Henri says there's going to be an election. He just doesn't know when.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, he's pushing for it. Guys, we got to do it. We don't have a date yet.
But is there any infrastructure to have an election? I mean, what does an election look like in Haiti?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, Gene. I don't think that there is a kind of political infrastructure to stably have an election, but I don't even understand. I don't know who are the political actors that have the capacity to build infrastructure. Someone asked where the oligarchs and how they hold their power. Well, the oligarchs, as we've said before, are a group of individuals. Many of them come from foreign or Middle Eastern origin who have been operating in Haiti since the early 20th century, who, through their ability to maintain market share, have dominated the large and supermajority of the commerce in Haiti. So what you have is that you have a small percentage of the population, small, some would say less than 50 families, who control something like 85 to 90% of the population's economy. Many of them have Syrio Lebanese or Middle Eastern backgrounds. Some of them have European backgrounds. And they have a kind of racial economic hierarchy in the country where they extract resources from the country, have very little fealty to the national, nation state, or history of the country, and exist in a kind of separate sphere of influence where they have direct relationship with the State Department and also orchestrate any kind of political instability in the country that's necessary to facilitate their economic demands on the island.
The what the way that you're describing the situation in Haiti, um, would you would it be fair to compare it with a country like Libya, for instance, where the process of state collapse has gotten um, so prevalent, has progressed so far that you don't have that infrastructure to return a modicum of stability and regularity over the whole territory, but instead you essentially have to deal block by block with um, whoever has locally managed to cobble together enough force and enough organization to make it their territory.
Very astute comparison, Cuba, by the way. But one of the things that's fascinating about the conundrum that you bring forth is that what we're seeing in Haiti is really a consequence of what is known as the Republic of Port-au-Prince. In that these gangs are not operating in the suburbs or in the hills or in the mountains or in the other provinces. This is a consequence of the political apparatus of the whole country being so centralized in the capital that if you control the capital and you can neutralize the capital, you can neutralize the country. So I think that's a fair metaphor between what you're seeing in Haiti and the devolution of the Haitian nation state. Again, the goal here is not to romanticize the Haitian nation state prior to the troubles after the Jovenel Moïse assassination. There was profound corruption and internal, striations and problems that existed going back to the fall of the Duvalier regime, even including the Duvalier regime. But there is such a complete lack of order and chaos that has been unseen before. Where now these gangs and warlords are under total control over territories where they can take up whole legal infrastructure at their own whim. That I mean, my mom has friends who have had family members kidnapped by gangs. I mean, this is not something that is distant within the consciousness of Haitian society. She literally was talking to a friend of her, literally, who had her sister kidnapped by one of these gangs. So this has influenced every aspect and level of Haitian society, and it's basically become a terror zone for many people.
Who
And
who exactly are these gangs?
Disaffected street youth who are acquiring weapons from the outside, mostly the United States, who are, some would say, being financed by either former oligarchs or the rogue elements of the Haitian nation state. or some are suspecting maybe by international actors to maintain destabilization because they believe that resource extraction is easier when there's no government. Don't forget, there were, Hillary Clinton's brother had gold mine extraction contracts in Haiti. There are oil deposits in Haiti. There's iridium in Haiti. There are natural resources that have some value, and some would argue maybe it's more valuable to have a complete backwoods, destabilized government that won't get in our way than to have to deal with any government at all. I mean, Djene and Kuba, you guys have been in enough destabilized countries to know that, contrary to what people realize, you can make money in chaos.
That's true. However, I also hasten to point out that the United States, especially American officialdom, has been very good at squandering opportunities. For instance, in Iraq and in Afghanistan, both countries are very resource rich, but despite the cratering of any local opposition to American extraction or American economic interest, the U.S. was never able to realize any of those gains. And in many cases, they accrued to Chinese firms or other geopolitical rivals of the United States. So you can't even have an indirect benefit with your allies picking up the profits from local extraction. And when you bring up the State Department too, we're a long way away from the Dulles brothers, and the rot, the decay in the infrastructure of governance in Haiti, in certain ways, is a much more exaggerated version of a similar bureaucratic institutional decay that you see in the center of the United States, where institutions that once were quite responsive and capable, now I wonder if anybody needed to greenlight the hit in Haiti from the State Department, because the disorganization, the lack of control, the politicization, the factional infighting at the peak of cabinet level departments in the United States is so great that a moderately ambitious middle level operator can actually claim enough autonomy so that they wouldn't even have to go all the way to their boss.
But also, private interests in the United States are so powerful. It seems perfectly plausible that you can have wealthy individuals based in the United States making use of American law, building basically their own foreign policy, hiring mercenaries, bringing people over, and working specifically as private citizens to engage in their own foreign policy. I mean, one thing I would say is probably very different from, let's say, Iraq and Afghanistan and Haiti, is that the American apparatus has far more historical experience in dealing with Haiti, including a long period of occupation, the fact that Haiti is very close by, the fact that there are large Haitian diasporas in the United States. I think America has a far deeper penetration into Haitian politics than it has into a place like Libya, Iraq, or Afghanistan. And there's probably far more, let's say, institutional, or at least even private institutions have far more capacity to deal and understand what is going on in Haiti.
And I think, to pick up on that, much of American foreign policy was already privatized, beginning in the Clinton years, but through the network of think tanks, of institutes, of journals, of the other kind of parastate infrastructure that appears to be publicly oriented, but is in fact creature of its donors. And that was how the privatization of peak foreign policy could take place. You had to contest it out through these institutions, but that was the point of entry for private interest. Now, I don't even know if you need to duke it out. If you're a sufficiently powerful billionaire with your own sort of private in-house security, private in-house policy shop, private in-house analysts, economists, other experts, then under conditions of political sclerosis, when there's major geopolitical events elsewhere that are distracting peak attention, then you can just do it yourself unilaterally. And nobody's going to arrest you. Nobody's going to investigate hard enough to make trouble for you. And it is indeed scandalous that a year has passed and we have no answers as to who assassinated the president of a sovereign, independent nation at the heart of the Caribbean.
There's a lot of intimidation that goes back to, well, it can go back to the gangs, but the gangs are also affiliated with politicians and all kinds of people in power. So there were 3 convictions in the U.S. around this case, but the case is still going on, but it's on its 5th judge.
Wow.
The other 4 dropped out due to intimidation, or they wouldn't say, but we know what
This
that
is in
is.
Haiti, Toussaint?
This is in the United States.
It's in the States?
Yeah. So imagine how it is in Haiti, the kind of intimidation people are dealing with.
What
Is
say
there-
you, Robert?
I think she's absolutely correct, man, because the people fail to realize that even in a country as poor as Haiti, you have international actors that have been, working on economic plans. For example, the sweatshop industry, manufacturing underwear, clothing, all that stuff. That's a major industry in Haiti, and those economic interests do not like the fact that you have workers trying to strike for increasing minimum wage. They have connections to oligarchs who will make sure that things get done to make sure their interests are protected. Whenever trade rights or rights to trades are negotiated in Haiti, they're not having citizens that are normally related to the government getting on those conversations. They are members of the oligarchy who have exclusive roles in negotiating what kind of trade impacts are being signed and deals are being signed that affect the country. So there are interests of a higher level that are definitely in the capacity to put pressure on all types of branches of government that are interested in resulting in terms of what is going to happen when the determination is coming down to what is really going to go to transpire in terms of finding out who committed this crime.
I have a question, Pascal. Given this long-term sort of chaos that takes place in Haiti, the breakdown of law and order, all this kind of social, the social consequences of the collapse of the Haitian state, is there any sense that, well, there doesn't seem to be a left, but is there a neo-Duvalierist movement that is looking back to the Papa Doc days and saying, you know what, as bad as Papa Doc was, at least you could walk the streets of Port-au-Prince safely at night?
Well, there absolutely is a neo-Duvalierist element in the atmosphere. As a matter of fact, one of Duvalier's grandsons was considered to be one of a potential candidate for the next presidency, as a matter of fact. And not only that, there has been a lot of reminiscence amongst people saying, like, at least during Duvalier, the streets were on. We had, the electricity worked, the streets were clean, and everyone knew how to keep themselves in check. So there is definitely a romanticization with the Duvalier regime. Some people would have argued that the political party of Jovenel Moïse was a neo-devaluist, revanchist party in and of itself. The party of PHTK was considered by some to be a neo-devaluist regime because of its attempt to incorporate some of the kind of black nationalist ideological trappings that were known for under Duvalier. So there is a certain romanticization and fetishization for the Duvalier days. Definitely when in the case of the father, Papa Doc. in the consciousness of the Haitian people. And it's very sad, and it's
I mean,
quite
you saw the same thing happen in the Philippines. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
with Bongbong Marcos getting elected, the Marcos family never really left power after Marcos left the country. His wife stayed for forever in the country, and there's various family members that were in different Senate seats and state and local government seats. So it's no shock that Duterte leaves and maybe a worse figure with Bongbong Marcos comes into power.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This Is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.